Hey everyone, Cleo here and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be talking about the books that I read in September. Now for the month of September I'm quite happy with my stats, so I ended up with 5 books, and out of those 5 books I gave 2 books a 4-star rating, no actually 3 I think. Check. So yeah, I gave 3 books a 4-star rating, I gave 1 book a 3-star rating and 1 book a 2-star rating. Now if you've seen my September TBR, you know that I didn't have a September TBR but a US trip TBR, so I'd only set up a TBR for the 3 weeks that I would be in the US. And if you look at that TBR, then I totally failed because I only read half of those books, but I did also manage to read 1 book previous to my trip to the US. Now in reality I'm shooting this video for the, well, not the second time, but for the second day, because I've shot this video actually a week ago, right after my US trip, which might not have been the best plan because it took me forever to shoot it back then. I had to shoot it at least 6 times, but probably way more because I kept stumbling over the words and not being able to finish sentences or figure out what I wanted to say about them. And in hindsight, when I went in on Wednesday to edit the video, it turned out that about 30 minutes probably were missing from my video because 3 of the 5 books were not mentioned because apparently I'd been talking to my camera and my camera had not been actually shooting. So I hope that today will be a way better day in that sense because I hope to be filming all of it. Now, so let's get down to it. The first book that I read this month was a book that I had been meaning to get to for years, and then the moment that I figured out that the movie adaptation was going to be appearing, it really popped into my radar again. And then when I checked the in-flight entertainment guide and I saw that the movie was actually going to be available to me on the flight to the US, then I knew I had to try and get it in the week before. Luckily the book turned out to be super short, so it was also very doable. The book that I'm talking about is On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan. Now I don't have a fancy book to hold up because all of the books that I read this month were either on my Kindle or I had the audiobook for. So On Chesil Beach I read on my Kindle. I do think that I might want to get the physical copy of it because I loved it very much. Now I gave it a 4-star rating, but that's just the rating that I gave on Goodreads. In reality I think I would give it a 4.5-star rating because I really liked it. The only problem was that at times the story lagged a bit, which meant that I couldn't give it a 5-star rating because it's just not up to that level. I'm sorry. But the writing was wonderful and the opening chapter was just so amazing. The opening chapter is really one of the best opening chapters I've read in a long time, and the first phrase is also one of the best first phrases I've ever read. So that's why I'll be reading it to you. So the first phrase goes like this. I even highlighted it, which indicates that I really liked it. They were young, educated and both virgins on this, their wedding night, and they lived in a time when a conversation about sexual difficulties was plainly impossible. Now the first phrase tells us a lot about the story. So the story, well, there's not much to say about the story, so I'll just say like the very basic premise of it. The story is we're following these 2 young people on their wedding night, and they're both going into it with different mindsets a bit. She's very reluctant, she's kind of seeing it as more of a duty, and she's kind of repulsed by the whole experience. He is very eager. He's not been able to kind of breach her reservations, so every time he's tried to get closer to her in a physical sense, she's kind of pushed him away, and so he's expecting to be able to break all of these boundaries on their wedding nights, because now in the society in which we are placed, it's expected. But that's the setup for it, and in the first chapter Ian McEwan does a wonderful job of setting up this tension, this scene of different expectations, different feelings toward the night, and you really have these feelings set up against the scene of them both sitting at the dining room table, having small talk but also a lot of silences while being right in front of the marital bed in which the action is going to take place later. So you really have this anticipation, this dread, physically represented by the bed that is also present in the scene. So I thought it was a masterful first chapter, and Ian McEwan has a wonderful way of writing. It was the first book by him that I read, but I will definitely explore some of his other works. Not giving a time frame for that because my TBR is just always so long, which is something that you guys will know about, because I think everybody who reads a lot is struggling with the problem of having so little time and so many books to get to. Now, I will say the story lags in certain parts, so at some points you feel like you're going too much into the past of their relationship, and that might drag the story down a bit. There's also not too much action taking place, which for some reason, which for some readers might also be problematic. I actually liked it. I mean, I don't always like it, you know. A lack of action is not always going to go over well with me, but Ian McEwan definitely makes up for it in his character description, in his description of tension underneath the surface action. I would definitely recommend it. If you don't pick up this book, try one of his other books. He has lots of books that have been highly acclaimed, and a lot of other movies have also come out based off of his novels. I cannot come up with the name right now, but there's a movie with Keira Knightley in it and Saoirse Ronan about an affair between like this high-class lady and probably somebody of a lower standing. Cannot come up with it. Try to put it down there. Okay, so then it was time for my US trip, and my plan initially had been to spend all of the time on the flights reading, because one of the books that I look forward to each of the past few years the most was coming out. So the fourth book was coming out in a series that I absolutely adore, and so I was expecting to be brushed away by this book and to immediately spend all of my time reading it. Problem is, it kind of took me a little bit to get into the fourth book, because you're kind of transitioning from the third book into the fourth book. Also, I didn't really have a great memory of all of the characters that were like the side... I'm calling them side characters, but they're actually quite crucial to the plot. But I'd forgotten quite a bit of the backstories of like how did they end up in the company of our main character, let's say, and what happened with this character in the past. Afterwards, I found out that at the very end of the ebook there was actually a list of characters. I don't know whether that would have helped me so much, but it might have definitely helped me a little bit. Also, the 3 previous books I listened to on audiobook, which is, I mean, I like audiobooks, and I'm not saying audiobooks are bad or anything. I absolutely adore them, but I'm not saying like they're better than books or worse than books, but there's a lot of times they're easier because they take up less of your attention. And so it's easier to finish an audiobook in one go, it seems, than to read a book in one go, at least for me. And so while I was able to almost finish the previous 3 books always in one go on the audiobook, I definitely was not able to do that on the e-reader. So while it might have taken me way longer than I thought, in the end it took me the entire first week to finish this book. This does not mean that I did not like this book. I liked it a lot. But the problem was I was always so tired, and on the flight there I just couldn't focus enough to spend too much time on the book. I still spent quite a lot of time on the book, you know. I think I finished about a quarter of the book in the flights and on the flight, and then the rest in the rest of the week. But in the rest of the week I was usually too tired in the evening to read a lot, so I did manage to read a big portion of it on the flight. So what is it about? So this is actually I haven't even mentioned the title. So the book that I first read was Kingdom and Chaos. This is the 4th book in a I think it's gonna be like a 10-book series, I'm not entirely sure. So the series is called King's Dark Side. Could not get that out. King's Dark Tidings by Cal Kate. This series is not that well known on BookTube, I think. I have not come across anybody discussing it, so I hope to be changing this because it's wonderful. I mean, I feel like it should be up there with a lot of the top fantasy books. Not necessarily saying that it's on the same level as like a Game of Thrones or something, but it doesn't try to be on the same level, you know. I think in terms of subject matter and magical world, it's very much the same as like an epic fantasy, but the writing style is very different than you would find in a in a J.R.R. Martin or in a Patrick Rothfuss or anything like that. It is very, to me it seems to be more on the Sanderson side in terms of the readability of it. It is very fluid, I mean it's very fast paced, you go through it like easily. I mean it's written in a way that you're constantly going from action to action. It's not fully packed with descriptions or character building and the same way as you would get in most epic fantasy. Most of the characters are built upon in terms of what they do and in terms of their interactions with the main character. The main character of this book that we are following is a guy called Raskin. Now Raskin has a very mysterious past. He is raised in a fortress as of a very young age, and he's actually raised to be a kind of assassin, and also a cold-blooded one at that. And all of his teachers kind of grow to fear him over the years because he's just such a... well, he's just so good at what he's doing, and he constantly surprises them, and he's able to do stuff that nobody should be able to do, or at least not nobody should be able to do all of these things that well. But then upon his graduation, I feel there's something wrong with my focus. 1 second. Way better. So upon his sort of like graduation moments, his masters, so there are like 2 main masters who are setting up his program, they just tell him that he has one final assignment, and his final assignment is to kill all of the strikers, is what they're called. They are the teachers who taught him throughout the years. Now a massive battle ensues in which he has to try and kill all of these strikers because he's used to following rules, so he doesn't even judge whether he should be doing this or not. But one of them gets away, and his masters also end up getting wounded in the battle. But before his master dies, he is able to tell Raskin the final 2 rules. Now Raskin follows these rules, and he's been given, they all have numbers, but rule 1 and 2 he has not been given up until now, and these are the 2 rules he gets. However, because his master is dying, we're already led to believe that the rules that he's handed down are not entirely correct. So the rules are to kill with conscience, which, since he's being trained to be a cold-blooded killer, seems like, why should he suddenly start to kill with conscience? And to always protect and honor his friends. Now Raskin does not know the concept of friends. He is a cold-blooded killer, he's been trained not to have emotions, so I mean, we're allowed to believe that this is an error, and later on it's kind of hinted at that that's correct. But so Raskin sets out into the world basically to find this one striker that got away, and upon his travels he meets two other characters very early on, and that's Frisha and Tam, and they kind of introduce themselves as his friends, not like the first second, but in their first conversation at some point they say something that basically means to Raskin that they must be his friends. Now Raskin, who's totally unfamiliar with concepts like friends or love or anything like that, assumes that because they're telling him that they are his friend, that they must be his friends and that he must protect and honor them. And the story sets out from there, and the character of Raskin evolves a lot throughout the story. However, he does not show his evolution to other people, so the reader is more aware of the evolution that Raskin is going through than even he is, because he also does not admit to himself that maybe he is starting to understand the concept of love or friendship, just because he does not recognize these feelings that he's feeling. He just recognizes pain, for example, in relation to certain actions that take place or certain reactions that people have to him, but he does not understand where this pain is coming from. Now, King's Dark Tiding is definitely worth it. You can only get it on the e-reader or on an audiobook, sadly. Now, Cal Kate is very good at the time for stories. I mean, one comes out every year, and he's also writing a second series, which will be coming out somewhere in the spring of 2019, I think. So, I'm not promising, but don't be worried about the possibility of this series not getting finished. Up until now, he's been very good at sticking to a timeline. He also has a blog in which at least once every 6 months or something he will post an update on his progress on the book. So you are informed, and it's not like a J.R.R. Martin in which you will have to wait for years without news of whether or not it will be possible this or that year. So it took me about the entire first week of my trip to finish this book. It was quite long. I mean, I don't know how many pages because it's on an e-reader and it depends upon your size and things like that, and on Goodreads it doesn't say the amount of pages. But I did feel like it might be longer than the others. I'm not sure. I'll see when the audiobook is out whether it is longer in time than the others. But towards the end of the week I was getting in so much more reading, even though I was still as tired as before, just because I really wanted to know what was happening. A final thing that I should also be saying about this is the writing is not always perfect, okay? So I say that I absolutely love these books, but you also have to forgive sometimes the writing, I think, because in my opinion he's still developing his writing style, and at times his dialogue is not perfect. Though that might also just be because Raskin is such a socially awkward character, and that he's so emotionally detached that the way he answers might seem like it's stilted and that's something that doesn't work well in dialogue, but maybe it's just a reflection upon the Raskin's character actually. So I'll leave that up to you. If you've read this book, please comment on it. What do you feel about the overall writing in this series? But then when it was time to pick my second book, it was pretty easy because we were entering Yellowstone National Park. You cannot see it, but I'm wearing a t-shirt for it. I'll try to, maybe I'll put it on my Instagram account. In Yellowstone I had already decided that I was going to read a book about Yellowstone. So the second book that I read was Lost in My Own Backyard, A Walk in Yellowstone National Park by Tim Cahill. I'm guessing this pronunciation, so don't shoot me for it. So Tim Cahill is a writer who lives very close to Yellowstone. I mean, he moved there, he is not originally from there, and he spends a lot of his time exploring Yellowstone and its backcountry. I gave this book 2 stars. Now the 2-star rating does not reflect my enjoyment of it, it just reflects, I guess, what I would say is the overall feeling about it, just because I feel like if you're not in Yellowstone, if you have no intention of going to Yellowstone, there's really no point in reading this book. And I don't feel that way about every travel book, you know. In his book so the book is basically about 2 parts, the main part of Yellowstone that is visited by most people, and then the backcountry, and he discusses these 2 parts in a series of hikes. This time I did catch when my camera went off, so I think I left off here. I hope I left off here. So I don't think that travel stories can only be enjoyed if you're interested in going to that place, or if you've been into that place, or if you are at that place. However, I do feel the way about this one. Because he is discussing this subject matter in a series of hikes, I really feel that it is mostly interesting for somebody who is intending to go on one of these hikes. Look, so she decided to join and to try and distract me. But if you're going there, I think it's definitely worth it, because I was reading it while I was there, and I kind of felt like, I wish I could still add this or that to our itinerary. Some were not possible, you know, Mount Washburn I knew in advance was not going to be possible because it was closed, so I did want to add it to the itinerary beforehand, and so in that way it was a bit bittersweet to read about it, because like, yeah, I wanted to do this. And when he's discussing like how little people do it versus how many people visit Yellowstone, I was like, yeah, but I would have done it if it was open. But yeah, I think it's a very good way to read about some of the lesser known parts. I mean, there were even parts about lesser known parts when he was discussing the main area of Yellowstone, and definitely if I would have read it in advance I might have looked into backcountry hiking, even though, yeah, it's bear country. I'm not that sure whether in advance I would have been so eager to go out into the backcountry where there's less hikers, and so bear safety is definitely something you need to take into account more. I enjoyed it, and but it was a great accompaniment to my time in Yellowstone, just because I would read some of the well, some facts about Yellowstone that I hadn't found while I was researching it in advance. So if you are considering going to Yellowstone, take a look at it. I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily the most invigorating read of your lifetime, but he has an enjoyable way of writing about Yellowstone, and he has a very good way of making you feel excited about Yellowstone. So give it a go, and then you might get some ideas about places that you might want to visit in Yellowstone. We actually did go one place because of him, and it's not a place he recommends neither. So there's a chapter about a petrified forest that is in Yellowstone that I had no idea existed in Yellowstone. But so there's this one petrified tree that is actually marked on the map, not found in my research about Yellowstone, that we did visit. I would also now say it's not worth it, but apparently somewhere there must also be a petrified forest. If the explanation about how to get there were not as vague, and if it weren't like clear that he also had a hard time finding it, we would have tried to find it. But yeah, we know we're not the best explorers, so we said like, okay, maybe we should just go to this petrified tree that is clearly marked on the map. But yeah, so I would still... But so yeah, it might give you some tips about Yellowstone that you did not get out of your guidebook, which, I mean, I have the guidebook for the entire US, so it's not very big on the details about certain national parks. It mostly just does like the high points. If you have a very extended guide on Yellowstone, probably you will have also read about some of these things in there. But the book definitely might be able to give you some feelings of whether it is worth it or not. So after Lost in My Own Backyard, I picked up Ranger Confidential: Living, Working and Dying in the National Parks by Andrea Langford. Andrea, how do you pronounce this in English? Sorry, it was a Belgian pronunciation. I'm not entirely sure how you guys do it, so I'll just stick to the Belgian one. So this was quite interesting to read, and I think it's something that will be interesting to read even for people who do not go to national parks. So it is an added experience if you do go to national parks, but it was a very surprising read. I did not know in advance what to expect. I mean, I was expecting more along the lines of crazy stories of what goes on in the national parks, which is definitely what you're getting, but you're very much getting it in a tone of see, this is what these rangers have to go through all of the time, and this is how badly they're treated for it. Which is quite shocking. I mean, when you're in a national park, I think a lot of people have the impression that a park ranger must have like the best job in the world, because they get to spend all of their time in this wonderful nature. They get to experience it all of the time. They get to see it evolve and help people appreciate the beauty in it, and prevent them from having too much of the danger of it. And that's also clearly, I mean, it's clearly shown in the book, that's what gets people started, you know, the excitement for nature, the excitement of helping to preserve and protect this nature. However, a lot of them get bitter over time due to the fact that they're constantly saving people from themselves, saving people from stupid things that they do, like hiking into Grand Canyon without taking the proper precautions of hydration, or going on hikes that are way above their level. Of course, there are also many people who are experienced and who just who just end up in conditions that they were not expecting. But yeah, a lot of their time seems to be going into protecting people from themselves instead of protecting the nature from people, more or less. I mean, I'm not saying, but that's what makes them bitter over time. Also the fact that they are not well compensated for it. So for reaching a certain position, like for example, if you want to be a search and rescuer and you want to be able to do certain rescue missions on a helicopter, you have to do extra trainings, and these are not, I mean, you don't get a higher pay if you've done this extra training, if you're extra accredited, and so mentally you have a higher position, but you're not recompensated for it, and that's just horrible, because I mean, people should always feel that they are being recognized for the effort they put in, because otherwise you just get unhappy employees, which is never a good thing. I mean, it's horrible. It's so sad that these people go in with so much idealism, and this idealism just gets broken down over time because they are not getting the gratitude for what they're doing, that the gratitude that they feel like they should be getting. But I mean, for me it was very interesting to read about it. It was interesting to read about certain facts about some of the national parks. I haven't gone to all of the national parks that they were mentioning in there. I think I only went to Grand Canyon and Yosemite, and Yosemite I didn't go to on this trip neither, but it was still very interesting, and I think it's a very interesting experience to read this if you've been to a national park or if you are in a national park. It just gives you a different feeling about the experience you've had. But still, and I'm not the best judge of this because I cannot objectively judge on it, but if you've never been to a national park, I think you could still enjoy it. I think it would maybe make you want to go to a national park. I hope so. I mean, read it. If you haven't been to a national park, read it and let me know. I'm really interested actually about whether or not you would enjoy this book if you've never been to it. So let me know. I mean, I'm not gonna say you'll enjoy it, but I hope you will. I was thinking that I missed a book somewhere, but apparently I've already talked about 4 books, so I'm on schedule. So the 5th and final book is actually not, it's like somewhere in there. I think it's between, I think I finished it between Lost in My Own Backyard and Ranger Confidential, and that is America for Beginners by Leah Frankie, and this is the book that I listened to as an audiobook. So, so the premise of the book is we are following a Indian widow, so she's just become a widow. Her name is Paval, and so her husband has just died, and there had been a conflict between mostly her husband and their son over the past year, since her son came out to them and said, I'm gay. Basically her husband kind of disowned him, told her not to be in contact with him anymore, and then a year in the past of the beginning of this book, her husband got a call from somebody in the US telling him that her son had died. Now, the moment that her husband died, she starts to wonder, was this true, or was her husband just speaking like metaphorically, just saying he's dead to me, and why did I just believe him at the time? Why didn't I just ask for more information, ask for confirmation, ask to see some documentation? I mean, when her husband dies, she has to take care of so many legal things, and she didn't really notice any of that at the time of her son's supposed death. So she decides to go to the US and to seek out the person her son was living with. Now she feels like she needs preparation for this. She cannot just fly immediately there because she's not ready for it. So she books an entire road trip across the US, and since she is a widowed Bengali woman, she cannot just be alone with a male travel guide. She will also need a female companion. And so the book follows the journey of these 3 characters across the US towards the end destination. Now her guide now both her guide and her companion are not aware of the situation with her son. They are aware that she is a recent widow, but they don't know that she's also lost her son, or that her actual mission is to find her son, or at least the guy her son was spending his time with. It was very interesting to read this while in the US, while being surrounded by the scenery of the US. It was wonderful to then have a story about somebody else exploring the US in a sort of road trip. I gave it 4 stars in the end. I think not on Goodreads, I would probably give it 3.5 stars. I mean, I really enjoyed it and had a good experience with it. However, it also didn't really feel like the book was such an important experience in my life or in this year to me. I mean, it didn't stand out from other books necessarily. So the 4-star rating for me is more of a, yeah, it's a good book, it's very enjoyable, I would definitely recommend it to others, but it's not like it's one of the best books that I've read or listened to this year. Nevertheless, do give it a try if you're looking for I call them like in-between books, like a book that is charming, nice, good, but that's not like necessarily gonna make you feel all the feels, in order to say it like that. Though I did shed some tears at the end of the audiobook, so you will be feeling some things at least. It's interesting from the perspective of representation. I cannot judge on whether the Bengali accent and things like that in the audiobooks are legit, whether they might even feel, whether they might feel racist. I know I once had an audiobook with a Chinese accent in it that I actually felt to be totally unnecessary. I enjoyed the accent in this audiobook, so I don't know whether this is because I have no understanding of what an Indian accent should be like, or whether it is correctly portrayed in this audiobook. So let me know if you feel like it might be offensive. And then I don't know whether the representation is something that people might take offense to, but I felt it to be okay. The only problem I had with it was that we are given 2 representations of what it is like to be gay or lesbian in this common age. We are given the experience of one person whose family totally embraces him and his sexuality, and then we are given the opposite experience. Now this is normal, both experiences exist. The problem I just had is that the happy experience is the American one and the bad experience is the Indian one. We shouldn't be looking at it as a generalization of the US experience versus the Indian experience. There's just a danger of people doing that. And then I did start 2 other books on the US trip, but I was not able to finish them, and when I got back to Belgium I was way too tired to be able to try and fit them in that 2-day period that I still had in the month. So they will be added to, well, not both of them, but one of them I have to finish in October because it's for my book club. The other one I think I'll need more time to be able to finish an audiobook that lasts 26 hours. But so yeah, you'll be seeing them back in one of my next videos. Well, that was it for the month of September. 5 books, I'm quite happy with it. Yes, could I have gone for more, but actually the TBR was way too ambitious. So that just goes to show I'll have to try and be more realistic in my TBRs from now on, and you will probably see that in the next video I'm shooting, my October TBR. If you've read any of these books or if my video really made you excited about any of these books, please let me know. It's always nice to get comments about people's experience with your video and to see totally different opinions about books than the ones that I've been proclaiming here. And as for always, until next time, bye!